Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, you're holding up a book. You're holding a book up to the camera.
I know, it's come to that.
It says Kushner, Inc.
I'm reading this book on Jared Kushner by Vicky Ward. It's very good. It has basically everything nasty about Jared. But it helped solve one of the mysteries, I thought, of the Trump administration, which one of the central mysteries is, why is he so fucking nice to Russia? Why does he always say nice things about Putin, et cetera, et cetera?
You know, the resistance has a theory about that, Mickey.
Well, they have several theories. Which one are you thinking of?
That in return for Russia helping him win the election, he is, does stuff for them. That's a standard resistance theory, is it not?
Well, no, it's more than that. They have compromise on him. They have him urinating, watching models.
I think they've given up. I think the golden shower theory has.
They've cut him in on various future deals. I don't buy any of that.
But I think the favorite resistance theory is, the one I cited. Anyway, what have you learned in this book?
But that's weak too, because they didn't really do that much to help him win the election.
Hey, wait! If we're gonna turn this into
Sorry. I just thought this had an interesting theory, which will segue into another topic. I guarantee you.
Jeffrey Epstein, because Vicky Ward wrote the Vanity Fair piece on Jeffrey Epstein.
Not Jeffrey Epstein, but because Jared was convinced by MBS and MBZ, the two Arab leaders,
the UAE, MBZ of UAE,
and MBS of Saudi Arabia, that Russia would help get Iran out of Syria. It comes up a couple times in the book, and that is not an insane theory. I mean, I previously thought that Trump just wanted to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, so he sucked up to Putin. But this is an actual legitimate substantive reason. And Jared, the one thing that comes out in the book is the only thing he cares about is Israel. So if he can do a favor for Israel and help sort of set up this vision for anti-Iranian vision for peace in the Middle East, and Russia's going to help, that's a pretty good reason to suck up to Putin. Now, why couldn't he just say that? Is that enough to explain the mystery of why Trump was so nice to Russia? I don't know, but it's certainly a plausible sort of building block in the theory as to why that is.
Before I answer that question, I want to interject that, speaking of Israel, of course, today, Iran's top nuclear scientist was assassinated, almost certainly by either Israel or an Israeli proxy, possibly with American help, and I want to talk about that later. The other thing I want to interject is happy birthday to us, or happy anniversary or something. It was 15 years ago this month, 15 years ago, that the first Bob Mickey dialogue aired on the Bloggingheads TV platform. And I want to say a little more about that at the end of our conversation.
Okay, we're going to try to keep it short today.
But we are going to try to keep it short because this is our Thanksgiving edition, when lesser podcasters might just be taking the whole week off.
We go the extra mile.
We go the extra mile, or half mile in this case.
I'm gonna start the timer.
Okay. How many minutes do we have left before we stop?
Well, I set it at an hour, so we have 59 minutes.
Okay. Now back to... So wait, the idea is that Russia said they could get Iran out of Syria, and that was so appealing to Trump that
Russia, that MBS and MBZ thought that Russia would be valuable in getting Iran out of Syria. I don't know valuable in what sense. Would they pull strings with Iran or chase them out militarily? I don't know which one. Maybe a combination of both.
Yeah, I mean, I think much optimism on that front probably rests on underappreciating how important it is from Iran's point of view to have Syria as a kind of a buffer state against Israeli aggression and American aggression, although obviously there's some forms of aggression that can be inflicted on Iran without going through Syria.
You mean a failure of cognitive empathy? Cognitive empathy?
I couldn't have said it better than your attractive bird just said it, Mickey. Cognitive empathy, that is one of the dimensions on our well-known progressive realism report card grading system.
Well, Supposedly, MBS just chickened out of a strike on Iran. He had a meeting with Pompeo and Netanyahu, where Netanyahu urged a strike on Iran before Trump left office. And MBS was worried, that this is just from a very good story that was actually linked at the top of Drudge, so everybody's read it. Iran had launched attacks on Saudi oil facilities, and he didn't like that, and he was somewhat deterred. And also, he didn't trust Biden to back him up. Once Biden gets in office, why attack Iran if there's not going to be any backup in 2 months? So that makes sense, but it makes sense that he chickened out.
Well, then how do you explain this assassination if they're worried about Biden backup?
This was Plan B. This was the second best thing that Netanyahu could do if he couldn't get us to attack Iran's nuclear reactors.
By the way, something I just read on Twitter? I thought, when this happened, I thought, actually, Israel is a state sponsor of terrorism. I mean, they will, of course, for well-understood reasons, never actually appear on our official list of state sponsors of terrorism. But this is not the first time they've done things like this. It qualifies as terrorism. And then look at this tweet I saw from John Brennan. As you may know, he used to be director of the CIA. He tweeted within the last hour, "I do not know whether a foreign government authorized or carried out the murder of," I can't pronounce the guy's last name, but the Iranian guy. Then he says, Brennan says, "Such an act of state-sponsored terrorism would be a flagrant violation of international law and encourage more governments to carry out lethal attacks against foreign officials." Interesting that he's using the phrase state-sponsored terrorism. I mean, he knows who he's subtweeting. He knows he's talking about Israel. And so I'm just, I'd just like to nominate him for CIA head in the Biden administration.
You didn't bring that up in your conversation with Bill Kristol.
How many things are we going to get into here?
Israel's state sponsor of terrorism would have been a good topic.
Yeah, I was a little, in some respects, gingerly in my conversation with Bill Kristol.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that either here or in the parrot room, depending on when the time.
I just thought that was a useful. I thought these geopolitical concerns, even if they're completely bogus, there are some loose ends from the Trump presidency, and the mystery of Putin is one of them. Yeah, but
the funny thing is, it's not as big a mystery as people say, because Trump has not been as accommodating of Russia as the resistance would like to think. I mean, he did provide arms to the Ukrainian government, which another president might not have done. Obama didn't do it. And of course, he tried to hold it up as leverage to get, them to investigate Joe Biden. But the fact is he did it. And he's levied some sanctions, I think, and so on. So he hasn't exactly been a Russian puppet. He does speak respectfully about Putin, but I think that predates his presidency. I just think he likes authoritarians on horseback, shirtless authoritarians on horseback.
Also, sucking up is his way of seeking influence. So if he does want Russia to cooperate on some things, it's perfectly plausible that he would just suck up mercilessly in public.
Mm-hmm.
But it became dysfunctional at some point. At some point, if he'd said something nasty about Putin, it would have gone a long way to help him. So there also was this thing that people said he was doing Russia's bidding by destroying the planes that we use for the Open Skies Treaty. But if you read the story further, I think Rachel Maddow made a big deal of this. If you read the story further, they were going to replace those planes anyway. They just didn't get budgetary authority. And the main thing that's on the planes aren't so special. It's the software and the gizmos that they stick on them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was less of a doing Putin's bidding than it seemed to be at first blush. But I agree with you. Thank you for defending Trump on this.
It's, I hope there are not many more weeks in which I can defend President Trump. I figured I should take advantage of the. Do you think Trump's hopes for a second term are now dead, or just? You're
going to come up with the fucking betting markets still have them at 3%. Yes, they're dead.
Actually, weirdly, the betting markets went from 3% to like 7%. a couple of days ago, and I was puzzled as to why. I've since learned that you might be able to explain some of this as via a couple of things. A, they're thinly traded now, more thinly traded, so it takes less money to move the needle. And B, apparently there's some way that people who bet on Biden and want to get their money now rather than wait until it's official can, I guess, via a bet on Trump, somehow basically get their money now, go liquid now. And I don't understand how it works, but I got this from an extremely smart professional bettor who actually talked to people at Betfair, one of the main sites. So there's that. But I continue to this addiction I can't shake of listening to the Bannon podcast continues to haunt me because they ain't given up. I mean, Bannon, as of Wednesday, day before Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving, by the way, was still guaranteeing 100% certainty Trump will be the next president. We got this. We got this, as he says. The deplorables have got this. So I won't rest until Bannon himself finally lays down the sword.
There's a lot of good stuff on Bannon in this book, too. Although he's not always right. I had thought he'd always been right.
You mean Bannon or
Bannon in the White House, that he was a pretty good advisor in the White House.
Jared, wouldn't Jared highlight Bannon's mistakes? Weren't they adversaries?
Well, right, but Jared didn't talk to this author. This is all sourced via Bannon.
Oh, yeah, I'm confused. I'm sorry.
Bannon's the person who blasts all the reporters, and he's only 80% accurate. So,
what was he wrong about?
God, I forget. I knew you were going to ask me that.
Yeah, that's I think every once in a while we should give ourselves a little Biden test. Give each other a little Biden test.
No, I'll come up with it at some point. But the main thing he was right about was firing Comey. That was all Jared's initiative, and Bannon said it would be a disaster, and it was a disaster. So
who knows, though? I mean, the impeachment wound up possibly helping Trump get out the vote. It didn't work out certainly the way the resistance had planned. Who knows how these things play out?
But if he hadn't had the impeachment, he might have been a more effective president instead of obsessing about Mueller. So,
let me just say, by the way, that one thing I've come away with from these Bannon podcasts is he is a first-class demagogue. He's good. He's good. It's a good thing Trump is not as skilled as he is. I mean, he's dishonest. He's horrible, but he is skilled. Nope.
Anyway, I think Trump is here to stay. Trump is gone. He'll be gone on January 20th, if not before. And we're at the pardon stage. And there's some interesting pardons. Our first Epstein connection of the week would be the possible pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't quite see it because it will be one thing. People would immediately assume that Ghislaine had some goods on Trump. So that would sort of set the tone for the next 4 years of his life, which I don't think he wants. And also, I don't think it would help Ghislaine that much because surely she violated state laws, and Trump can't give a pardon for state laws. So she spends the rest of her time, traipsing from Florida to New York, answering to state prosecutors. I don't think that helps her that much.
I don't see Trump wanting to pardon her.
The big one would be Jared's father, Charlie Kushner, who, if you read this book...
that will probably happen, yeah.
If you read this... Well, since Jared is in charge of the pardons, I would say he has got a good shot.
He's got an inside track here.
This book goes heavily into Charlie Kushner, and he is a piece of work. You know that Adam Sandler movie about the New Jersey jeweler?
Haven't seen it.
It's a very well-crafted movie that I hated because all the characters were completely unappealing, including Adam Sandler, and you're supposed to root for him. And he comes from this New Jersey Jewish business culture that does not seem to have all that many, at least in the movie, all that many attractive qualities. They give him 10 seconds with his daughter at a dinner where he's a human being, right? And the rest of it is all rapacious horribleness. And Charlie Kushner seems to, everybody hated each other, yet they go to the weddings and they have to kiss and be nice to each other. And they're, it ended, of course, with Charlie Kushner hiring a prostitute to seduce a witness who I think was his brother-in-law, who was going to testify against him. And that, of course, became the main charge against him. He sent his sister the tape on her son's wedding day, I think, or something like that.
A tape of her husband. He sent his sister a tape of her husband having sex with a prostitute. You didn't have to, Mickey. We don't need that level of graphic detail.
I think it's an important nuance.
Okay.
I'd assumed it was much worse.
Like, for example? No, don't go there, don't go there. But, yeah, like that's just not the kind of wedding present a sister wants, or needs. But that's the kind of guy Jared's father is, I guess. Yeah. It's amazing Jared turned out as well as he did.
That is, and his brother seems to have turned out okay too. Although one of the things that I think is interesting is he and his brother supposedly have a secret profit-sharing agreement. His brother apparently is much more successful than he is. His brother starts a bunch of startups.
Well, no, but hasn't Jared kind of lapped him by becoming this potentate in the White House? Come on, nobody's heard of his brother.
Not financially, I don't think. No.
Oh, I suspect that he'll come out of this with as much liquidity as a man really needs.
Anyway, it raises the question: so what other arrangements there are? In other words, does Jared have some way of funneling money that he makes to Trump, for example, or through Ivanka or so? Who know? If they have secret agreements to funnel money, who the hell knows what's going on? That's my point.
Who does? So, Mickey, if the timer is running, maybe we should talk a little about the week's news.
Your interview with Bill Kristol?
No, that's not what I had in mind. Well, there was this big Supreme Court ruling.
It was not a big Supreme Court ruling. It was a per curiam opinion, the one about the religious institutions.
Yeah. That's not big. It's being taken as a big indicator of, the Barrett court.
If you read Sean Trent's Twitter feed, the Gorsuch opinion that's getting all the press because it's very pointed and snarky, but that wasn't the opinion. The opinion was just a per curiam opinion of the court, which basically said you can't treat religious institutions worse than other institutions. At least the First Amendment freedom of religion implies that, and that seems perfectly reasonable. So I don't see what the big deal is.
So wait, it wasn't
the big deal would be if they carved out some special exception. No, you can't do this thing to churches, even though you can do it to anybody else. That would be a big deal. This
so it wasn't about freedom of religion per se. It was more about freedom of assembly, or what?
No, it was about freedom of religion, but it said you can't discriminate. You can't. The problem was they have a capacity limit on churches, but not on other things. Okay,
right?
You can't have a rule that's worse for churches than other organizations similarly situated. At least freedom of religion says that, which makes a certain amount of sense. So they either have to put the capacity limitations on other things, or they have to have some other rule that can apply equally. It's like an equal protection clause for religion. I agree it will produce a lot of litigation. I deny that it's a big deal.
I mean, there is the fact that not all assemblies are created equal in the sense of, in churches they sing, and that's
they can have a no singing rule. I hate the singing.
Yeah. So you don't think this is a big deal?
It's not a big deal. It's the press is making it. Oh, Amy Coney Barrett. We're heading for the Handmaid's Tale. No.
Well, it does signify something we all kind of knew, that Roberts is no longer the swing vote.
Right.
And that's worth noting. And then there is and in Trump stuff, I thought another kind of overblown headline was Trump says he will step down if he loses the vote in the Electoral College. I don't think there had ever been any grounds for thinking otherwise. He had never said otherwise. I mean, he's being a jerk, but as you know, I think a very dangerous jerk is damaging democracy more every day. But I don't think he had never hinted that he wouldn't abide by the verdict of the Electoral College. I mean, all of his maneuvering right now is designed to manipulate the outcome in the Electoral College.
Good point.
Thank you. Because that was like the lead story on the Washington Post site.
You've defended Trump twice now.
I am nothing if not fair. I am nothing if not fair, Mickey.
We need to go for the trifecta.
Yeah, okay.
Can I talk about your interview with Kristol now?
Well, let's at least talk a little more about this assassination. This will be a good segue.
What is this, Washington Week in Review?
Yeah.
We have to go down the headlines and have informed reporters comment on the news? We're not informed reporters.
When I was like in my 20s, I looked worshipfully upon the people who, on Washington Week in Review, which was this PBS show that's presumably defunct by now, on Friday nights, when, you would get these
Not defunct. It's run by Robert Costa of the Washington Post.
Oh, you could do worse than that, I guess, if you're trying to keep it alive. That's not bad.
Was that a diss? No, I'm sure he's quite good. I mean, I don't like a lot of the stuff he's been writing lately, but he's a pretty good guy. I have an unpopular opinion about Washington Week in Review.
That it's good?
I haven't seen it, so I don't know if it's good. They have some good people.
That it was once good?
That it was about to get really good under Ken Bodie, and then they fired him and replaced him with Gwen Ifill, and that was then it became what it is, which is okay.
Whatever happened to Ken Bodie?
I think he became a journalism professor in Ohio or something like that, or Indiana. But
I can barely picture him. Did he wear a bow tie?
I don't know. He had glasses.
Same thing.
They had me on once, and I was all primed to say something about welfare, and then at the last minute I decided it was bullshit, and I said something else. So they can't. That's one thing they will not abide if you like.
I had a worse experience.
Don't do what they expect you to do.
I had a worse experience than that on TV. Can I just quickly tell you?
And that was under Ken Bodie. Maybe that's why they fired Ken Bodie.
I had the worst experience in the world. I was on when Chris Hayes had his Sunday show before he moved to weeknights on MSNBC.
Right.
They they drive me in, hour-long drive in a limousine, as they do for their guests and stuff. Right. And they were going to bring me on after the commercial break, and they put these headphones on you so you can hear the show, but then they're getting you ready and they're like talking to you, so you can't focus. Right. And then I sat down and he asked me a question that presupposed my comprehension of what they'd been talking about. I had no idea.
Yeah.
It was so bad. It was like that's
their fault, not your fault.
Tell that to the viewing public, which now thinks I'm a total. Anyway.
Well, shortcuts to the truth.
So, can we talk? The assassination is a little bothersome, I think, for one thing, flagrant violation of international law, and it's an attempt to, keep, by conventional reckoning, by people I trust who know more about this than I do, it is an attempt by Israel to prevent Joe Biden, and probably by Trump, who almost certainly had, signed off on it, I would guess. But an attempt to make it harder for Joe Biden to resurrect the Iran nuclear deal that Trump abandoned. That could happen in any number of ways. If Iran retaliates and you get a war, that would certainly impede return to the deal. But it could also just be that it makes it harder for Iran to be accommodating in negotiations as a political matter. Once you've had this done to you, and remember, to a lot of people in Iran, I mean, they think of there being this kind of Israeli-American axis that is bent on their destruction. And so, even if it's technically Israel that did the assassination and it's the U.S. that's asking for the concessions or whatever they're asking for the negotiations, it's kind of all coming from the same place, at least in in the view of a lot of people in Iran, and that makes it harder for the leadership, possibly the leadership, but in any event, that makes it harder for the leadership to be accommodating. So one way or another, it's Bibi and probably Trump, meddling in advance with the Biden administration. And I think it's a test of Biden. I don't think he has said anything about it yet, but if he, maybe he'll surprise me and say, I condemn this unequivocally and I reiterate my commitment to restore the nuclear deal. But that would be a pleasant surprise if he was.
What's the downside for him for saying that?
Well, I don't know. There's just people tiptoe around Israel habitually in Washington. They just,
they usually do that before the election. The election is now over.
Well, that's certainly true. It should be easier now, and that's why it's not that hard a test to pass. Now, maybe he's already said something. I haven't looked at Twitter.
He could also say, I condemn this, and secretly say, Israel, don't worry about it. I don't really condemn it. I mean, there's hundreds of things he could do that don't seem that difficult.
We'll see. I mean, let's check in next week and see if he did them. I agree with you. Shouldn't be that hard.
There are other gut checks for Biden on the horizon. That's
like
one
what?
of them. Well, Bruce Reed, who I have the greatest respect for, was up for OMB director, and the left is campaigning against him.
I saw that.
Because he's a deficit hawk, which is exactly who you want at OMB. I mean, they're supposed to be the green eye-shade budget cutters who prevent the government from becoming a bloated, carcass of waste. And so why not a deficit cutter, even if we don't care that much about deficits? And B, he was staff director of the Simpson-Bowles Commission, which proposed some cuts in Social Security. And I went and looked them up, and they're actually, I had thought that they were pretty severe cuts that I disagreed with. They're pretty mild cuts, raising the retirement age to 68, lowering cost of benefit increases for the middle and high income recipients of Social Security. They were fairly responsible cuts. And at some point, I mean, I'm all for not destroying the Social Security framework. But at some point, reality is going to set in and you have to make some adjustments, and they weren't crazy adjustments. So a gut check for Biden is whether he'll be intimidated by these ragtag groups on the left into not appointing Bruce at OMB if that's what Bruce wants to do.
But let me ask you. Yeah, go ahead.
Me saying nice things about Bruce isn't doing him any favors. So I should say he's way to my left. Just way to my left.
You should say that.
He's good friends with E.J. Dionne. He's way to my left.
Wow, that's really far to your left. Let's go further and say he's good friends with John Judas. Let's go that far.
Judith is to the right of E.J. now, I suspect.
Is he?
Oh, yeah. Why not?
John Judas worked at In These Times back in the day.
Sometimes, Bob, we go so far left, we're right.
It is ultimately a circle, isn't it, Mickey? Isn't it all a circle? And aren't we all in it? Why can't we get along? So, Mickey, here's my question. You said eventually they'll have to, I forget the phrase, reckon with reality or something on the deficit. My question is, do they? Or at least, do people believe that anymore? I mean, it just seems to me that conventional reckoning has gone out the window. I mean, at this point, given the way we've had to respond to the pandemic, which I think we did have to do. In fact, I think we need to do more. But it's just like all past expectations about how much deficit spending you could get away with have gone totally out the window, and how much you could get away with probably on the monetary front. I mean, I don't understand quantitative easing, but I know there's been a lot of it, and when it gets you close to negative interest rates, I don't know. These are two different issues, but don't you think there are now people? Don't you think it is taken more seriously than ever that actually you just don't have to worry about deficits?
Oh, sure. Well, that's been happening for 10 years.
Yeah.
Ever since ever since we ran huge deficits and inflation didn't happen, and I believe Krugman was a big advocate of that, and there are people who say, just you wait, inflation will happen, but it hasn't happened, and it all has to do with modern monetary theory, which I don't understand, and I think Krugman doesn't understand either. He's written about it. what the hell are you talking about?
The upshot is you can get away with more than we thought. I think that's the upshot of modern monetary theory.
Modern monetary theory is basically you can get away with murder. And Krugman has written to the major modern monetary theorists saying, can you really get away with murder? I mean, don't we have to bring the deficit in at some point? And I forget what her answer was. But so, yeah, but the Medicaid deficit, the Medicare deficit, and the Social Security deficit is handleable. But the Medicare deficit is just gigantic, and it's hard to believe you could just let that program run through the baby boomer generation without any reforms at all.
That's too bad because, as you know, I want Joe Biden to go to Georgia and say, I promised to lower the Medicare threshold to age 55 if I control the Senate, which is to say if you elect two Georgians.
That would be very smart of him. Don't give him any ideas. It's very important that the Republicans win in Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, Biden's going to ram through a nation-breaking amnesty.
Right. Okay. But, you know, speaking of all of this, I do think the Biden administration is kind of doomed, right? I mean, I don't want to sound gloomy, but in the sense that, first of all, you would think if there is such a thing as a fiscal reckoning that's possible in this universe, if there is such a thing as too much deficit spending, too much monetary easing, and eventually you pay for it in some kind of cataclysmic way, it's going to happen during the next 4 years, right? If that's possible in this universe, it will happen in the next 4 years, A. And B, you know, if Biden doesn't control the Senate, and he probably won't, unless my sage political guidance gets to his ears, you know, he's not going to be able to get anything done. And so whichever Trumpist opposes him is going to be able to say, see, we told you he can't do shit. He's not going to be able to do anything about health care. Because remember, Mitch McConnell, it's not just that it's inherently hard for a Democratic president to get things done with a Republican Senate. Mitch McConnell is known to have the philosophy. He has expressed it almost in so many words that he is happy to subvert the national interest to the larger goal of keeping a Democratic president from being reelected. He virtually said that about Obama, and he behaved.
Oh, he just said he was going to block everything. But
no, he said my goal is. Did he not say my goal is to keep Obama from being reelected? Did he not say that?
Right, he's the opposition party.
Well, no, whoa. Who has admitted that in the past? You may say that was their actual goal, but if you want to look like a reasonably responsible public servant, you're supposed to at least say, look, when I see a piece of legislation, I ask, is it in the public interest? Not, will it help the president get reelected? That's what you're supposed to say.
He would say stopping the president from being reelected was in the public interest and overrides it. And I'm sure when laws came up, he pretended to address them on the merits. But
so you do not think the Biden administration is doomed for reasons?
No, there was a very good essay by Chris Caldwell in the New Republic. Yes, the New Republic.
Of all places.
Sorry?
I said of all places, who would expect to see
the New Republic is back. This was a really good essay.
This is the even in the New Republic. Even the New Republic says.
What did
he say?
Even the New Republic published a Trump sympathetic essay, which basically said that Biden coalition was doomed because you have all these different factions and they're all really only held together by the desire to get Trump out. That wasn't that wasn't the key part of the piece, but
this is why
he basically thinks they're doomed. I think expectations are so low; it's hard to believe Biden can't exceed them.
First of all, if the Democrats don't control the Senate, it almost doesn't matter whether they dissolve in the absence of the unifying force of Trump. But if they do control the Senate, I would recommend that Biden dangle the horrifying prospect of the looming return of Trumpism. To say, look, Trump may be gone, he may run for re-election, but even if he doesn't, there will be some Trump-like figure that wants to speak for Trumpism. We must stick together.
But what's so terrible about Trumpism without Trump?
Well, to his coalition, it means immigration restrictionism and even cruel immigration restrictionism, which they don't like. I mean, you're imagining that it has. I mean, it depends on what you mean by Trumpism.
I thought immigration was a trivial issue that I was over obsessed with.
Well, the Democrats, and again, I don't know. This is an interesting question because I don't know how much of this to attribute to the presence of Trump as a unifying force. But there has been, over the last 4 years, pretty much consensus, I think, on the Democratic side that you don't want to give much more than an inch on immigration, right? I mean, that's the way they've talked.
Well, they've gone way to the left, yeah. But
that's what I mean. And I don't know. Maybe
I don't know if that reflects the bulk of the voters. It reflects the party.
Oh, I agree.
You're saying that Biden can say something that will alarm the party. Trumpism without Trump is coming, and that will alarm the activists and the organizers of the Democratic Party. But how does that alarm the voters?
Well, what
are the
is
voters
called,
terrified of what Trump did on immigration? Apparently not.
Well, what is Caldwell's scenario? I mein, first of all, is he assuming control of the Senate? How does this play out?
It's written before. I think his scenario is that they dissolve into backbiting, and he ignores the fact that the Republicans may dissolve into backbiting too. And immigration is the perfect issue for Biden because it splits the Republican coalition. That's probably one reason why he told Lester Holt that immigration, one of the first things he'll do is send a comprehensive immigration bill to Congress within the first 100 days. It splits the Republican coalition. B, as Trump recedes, immigration becomes more unpopular. People were like against the wall and for immigration just because Trump was for the wall and against immigration. As Trump recedes, it'll go back to where it was, meaning people will be more restrictionist. And C, it was a campaign promise, so that'll keep people happy. So he's just sending the bill, not saying it'll pass. So it's the answer is the Caldwell essay doesn't address that much. It mainly talks about it. It talks about the whole election in Marxian terms of the very similar to Ron Brownstein of the sophisticated new economy of the urban centers. It's basically stomping on the bucolic deplorables of rural areas. And he has a very sort of pessimistic view. He points out that anytime we've had economic growth that has basically swept up a majority of the population but leaves some people behind, the people that left behind don't get included in the economy, they get stomped. He sees the Civil War in that context. It was the prosperous North stamping out the outdated agricultural economy of the South.
But I thought the whole point was the South they were actually happy with the state of play, with the way things were. They just didn't want the North interfering. Not that they wanted radical change.
That's not what he says. I'm not sure it's the right analogy, but the point is he sees it as the result of the forces of production, which I think is correct, which is the Marxist way of looking at it. Where he differs from Brownstein is he says Brownstein also thinks identity politics is a big part of the future Democratic coalition. And that I think that's not necessarily true. Look at the last election where Latinos drifted to Trump. And B, it's wrong. I think identity politics is bad. So Brownstein shouldn't advocate it. And C, Brownstein is very moralistic about how the noble libertines of the cities are tromping out the uneducated deliverance people in the deplorable areas. And Caldwell points out that that's snotty.
Well, I think in any event, as far as identity politics goes, there will be a battle within the party about the role it should play. I mean, I think it should play less of a role than it's played, as you know. But that'll be a fight. I think he's basically right that internal contention will be one of the problems afflicting Biden. And I just think there's going to be a lot of them. I think the most reasonable expectation is that he will have a very difficult time of things for the reasons I've outlined and Caldwell has outlined, and so on. I don't know why you would expect. What is the argument that it's smooth sailing for him? I don't see that.
The argument that I just smoother than expected. It mainly involved lowering expectations. You know, right. McConnell knows Biden. He's worked with him for years. It's possible that they could do some sort of deal that Obama and McConnell couldn't do just because of personal rapport and because Biden is a much better deal maker than Obama. And, Obama would lecture people in meetings. Biden is probably unlikely to do that where it's counterproductive.
I do think Obama didn't do a good job on congressional relations, and he kind of...
He relied on Biden to do the heavy lifting when it was necessary.
So what did you think of the cabinet picks that were unveiled?
You really don't want me to talk about your interview with Kristol, do you? It ties in with what we were just talking about, okay?
Okay, jump to it. So, look, I have a backstory. So I did this interview with Bill Kristol, who, as people intimately familiar with my views may know, is something of a bête noire. Is that the word for me? Bête noire?
White whale? Yes.
No, it means black beast.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, or my white whale. No, I have more than one white whale. He would be one of them. He would be in my fleet of whales. But so I got kind of railroaded into doing this conversation with him. I had written, I'd periodically written unflatteringly about him, and a guy who had worked for him at the Weekly Standard, and I guess follows my stuff, and I think he even watches these podcasts. Suggested to REA of Bloggingheads TV that I was being unfair to him, so I should have this conversation with him. I took that to mean he should get his day in court. I should let him respond to my criticisms. So I actually went back and looked at the last couple of things I'd written and the various kind of parts of his past they had dwelt on in a critical way. But then it turned out when Kristol and I met on Zoom right before taping, that he wasn't aware that this was the purpose of the conversation. He wasn't even really aware of these criticisms. But at that point, I was, primed to go. So I proceeded with that, and I think
went fine.
I thought I looked kind of weird, actually. But
you looked slightly obsessed on a couple of little things. Well, but you got him to concede that he was wrong on the little things, so it was fine.
Well, they represented big things. I understand. What was weird was it seemed like I had gone back and dug up this thing that the Weekly Standard did when he was editor-in-chief. Well, no, this had been mentioned. I first came across it when it appeared when I was writing a piece in the New York Times about the same thing. And then in one of these recent critical of Kristol pieces I'd written, I had reprised that, whatever. So that was part of my recent indictment of Kristol. So I just went back and looked at these two pieces I'd recently written. But I agree, it looked like I had done this assiduous analysis, and that's what he thought. He said, well, obviously you've gone through every volume of the Weekly Standard. I said, no, I never read that,
anyway,
man.
He said, yes, those things were bad, but so we make mistakes. That's basically what happened. A couple things. Did you know you had an attack on Tom Cotton?
Yes.
Did you know his son works for Tom Cotton?
Kristol's son was legislative director for Tom Cotton after Kristol helped Cotton get into the Senate, much as Kristol's son-in-law was editor of Free Beacon. Now that
Kristol has turned against Cotton, is his son still working for Cotton? I think so.
I doubt it. It was a while ago that he installed him as legislative director.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago.
Or whatever the title was.
Yeah, I talked with the guy. He's really smart. I talked with him about immigration. So
you mean Kristol or the son?
Kristol's son. So he's perfectly qualified to do the legislative.
Well, then why don't you know what he's doing for a living now?
Because I haven't. You sort of imply he's quit lately. I talked with him a couple of years ago.
I don't know. He could still be there.
Anyway, the big thing, you never address the elephant in the room, which is, isn't this all about Israel, Bill? Isn't everything you do about Israel? He probably has a good response to it, and he sort of hinted at it, but you didn't phrase it that boldly.
Well, I kind of got into it. I mean, I first said, haven't you been infinitely malleable on domestic policy and changed your views constantly in an attempt to always assemble whatever coalition would support your foreign policy? And then later, I asked him, was not Israel part of your motivation?
And he admits it. So
okay, but it was because
he had a good answer. He had a good answer.
Okay, but the reason, if I didn't get into it more directly, it was because I felt awkward about our asymmetry of expectations.
I would feel awkward too.
Look, I got into shit nobody's ever gotten into with Bill Kristol.
The point of
okay?
Bloggingheads is to talk about the moose in the room.
The moose. Something that, by the way, Pinchito doesn't do as much as.
Right.
Didn't we decide that that's the new name for the
not Panchito?
I said Pinchito.
Oh, I thought you said Panchito. Okay.
No, that's the name that's the name we have given to the current Salzburger, and it's gonna stick.
I went back and reminded myself of what complete lack of balls he had in the James Bennett fracas.
Yes, I co-sign.
So Pinchito is good. I sign off on Pinchito. But
can I just say? I believe I asked Bill Kristol questions that no one has ever asked him in public. I didn't dwell. It wasn't. It was a good discussion. It was a good discussion, but here's my problem with the discussion, okay? Bill Kristol says they're talking about, we were talking about what happens to the Republican Party after Trump. And you brought up, like, Josh Hawley, and he said we can't have Josh Hawley because there's something horrible about Josh Hawley, even with Trump absent, that Kristol hates. And okay.
What is it that these Republicans, after Trump, would be proposing that would be so awful? I actually don't know what it is, aside from the fact that previously they had supported Trump. What policy are they proposing? And it's clearly not just Israel.
Well,
that Trump and you agree are so terrible. I don't get it. What is Kristol so scared of? What's the issue? Is it immigration? Can't be immigration.
No.
But Kristol actually was against the Gang of Eight bill. So he was pretty solid on immigration. Maybe he's changed again, but I don't think immigration is a big deal for him. So is it just populism per se? It can't be taxes because he doesn't mind the tax cuts. It can't be the Supreme Court. He doesn't mind the appointments to the Supreme Court. It can't be environmental policy. I can't believe he gives a shit about environmental policy. What is it about populist Republicans without Trump that so upsets Bill Kristol?
Well, hasn't he, first of all, staked out the position that Trump's ideology is a problem and not just Trump the person?
But why?
I don't know, but I don't know.
The objectionable part about Trump's ideology is that it's a cult of the personality and whatever. I embodied, the good. Okay, you get rid of that, you have a bunch of policies. What's so terrible about it?
Well, I don't know. Is it true that Hawley could be? I don't know anything about Hawley much anyway. But is it true that Hawley could not be relied upon to be A, hawkish on foreign policy, and B, particularly supportive of Israel?
Well, it's entirely possible. Yeah, he is Tom Cotton without. Well, he is the less hawkish version of Tom Cotton.
Well, that's your answer. Why are you so mystified?
It would be good to smoke out that answer. That
was my question. Failing?
That means if he answered that would mean it's all about Israel. I can't believe it's all about Israel.
You are a tough crowd. I take Bill Kristol interrogations where no man has taken them before, and I get shit from Mickey Kaus for. I'll tell you another failing in that conversation was when he said. I said, and I kind of suggested that he supported Sarah Palin for vice president, because she presumably was, he was happy with her foreign policy, and he said, I never discussed foreign policy with her, and I should have said, and you did not infer anything about her foreign policy from the fact that she had an Israeli flag in her office, even though she was governor of Alaska and not of Israel. But I didn't say that. I refrained from saying it.
That was all fine. Anyway, I just think the question is, all these people, these never-Trumpers, are continuing their jihad even after Trump is gone, apparently solely on the grounds that some people didn't agree with them and they supported Trump. And that seems like really weird. And obsessive and Inspector Javert-like. Once Trump is gone, let's talk about about Josh Hawley's policies and Tom Cotton's policies, and heaven forbid some other people's policies. the former governor of South Carolina, who's Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
Not completely gone Biden yet. Talk about their policies and not, where were you in 2020? Did you support Trump? And you're verboten, you're blacklisted if you did.
Nikki Haley is probably Kristol's ideal presidential candidate, don't you think?
It may be, that could be it too. And maybe he's pissing on Josh Hawley just because he likes Nikki Haley, yeah.
Anyway, I remember a long time ago, John Judas said to me, he was at some speaking gig or something, and he said, yeah, and Bill Kristol was part of it, and I met Bill Kristol, he's a nice guy, and I thought, I don't ever want to think Bill Kristol's a nice guy.
He came off as a nice guy in the interview. He did well for himself in the interview.
Yeah, he handled it well. He was a nice guy, but I will not relent in my crusade to defeat his ideology.
We're now done with my digression, so we can talk about the cabinet picks if you want.
Yeah, briefly. What do you think?
Well, who are you talking about? Yellen seems fine. I've always thought highly of her. She seems a responsible person.
No, wait, remind me. She's Treasury, right? So what does she represent ideologically?
I think putting employment first in the setting of fiscal and monetary policy and leaning in the direction of more jobs, maybe at a higher risk of inflation. I don't know. They can't even reach the inflation goals that they're trying for, so that's less of an issue. But there's some feud between her and Larry Summers where they claim that Summers was sexist. That just seems all bullshit and should be ignored. But she seems fine. I think it's Summers was sort of shut out, apparently. Doesn't sound like it?
The thing that got him fired as president of Harvard continues to follow him wherever he goes, I think.
On the other hand, he's the guy who first proposed the secular stagnation theory, which sort of is part of the rejiggering of how everybody thinks about interest rates. So he's maybe he's better off as a professor at Harvard, but he's the one who intellectually pioneered the paradigm shift.
But he's widely considered a jerk. Who else? I don't think he's a jerk. He has some sort of Asperger's thing. I said widely considered. Yeah, I have no opinion on the man.
He has some Asperger's thing. Like I ran into him and he said,
Mickey, you're not looking well.
No, he said, Mickey, didn't you used to pretend to be a serious person?
See, that's not Asperger's. That is a trollish instinct. He is a troll by nature.
No, he says I took it as not an unfriendly comment. It was like it was like a fuck you bro comment. It was like a Jewish
I see.
version of the dozens.
Then it was a joke.
But no, it was also what he thought. There was a serious point about it underneath it.
The truest things are said in jest, Mickey.
But I like the fact that he came out with his true innermost thought without any filter at all. There's just there's no pretense, there's no affect, there's no formality and polite. He's the opposite of Tony Blinken.
Is he connected to Jeffrey Epstein?
Some say, I doubt it.
You want a good segue to talking about the foreign policy?
There's a picture of him in Epstein's townhouse.
Well, that would be something.
Well, there is such a picture, so he's fully clothed.
So are there other cabinet picks in your bailiwick?
Well, I think Mayorkas is the big one.
Wait, remind us. Mayorkas is Homeland Security?
Homeland Security, big job, graduate of Beverly High.
Oh, right, a distinguished, like you.
Distinguished alumnus. All my friends from Beverly High know him and like him. He's very, he's very, very pro-amnesty in the sense of, like, remember there was a meeting in L.A. after the Gang of Eight bill failed, and he said, well, we're going to get the amnesty some other way. Okay, we have other tricks we can pull. And he pulled a bunch of the tricks. He had the DACA, the Dreamers, but he absolutely, there's no substitute for an actual amnesty. But his main thing is he's a not only is he really soft on immigration, the question is he really not soft at the end of the day? Is he going to do what's necessary to stop the surge that's coming? But he's also seems to be sort of semi-corrupt in that he did these favors with this very corrupt program that gives investors green cards in exchange for investments, and the Kushners use it to build hotels. And Terry McAuliffe started a car company, which was basically a scam to get money from Chinese people who wanted to be citizens to invest in this car company, which went bankrupt. And Mayorkas went out of the way to speed the approval of these deals. There are some criteria. They're supposed to bring jobs to the community. They're supposed to go to underdeveloped areas. Well, they built the Waldorf Astoria in Beverly Hills using the money. So how underdeveloped does the area have to be? But you have to at least get some rubber stamp approval. And Terry McAuliffe sort of had trouble because they didn't quite believe that this was a viable proposition. And so Mayorkas went to bat for him. So he does favors for Democratic bigwigs. And the Republicans are going to go after him, I think, and contest the nomination. And I think he might not get through. If the Republicans all hold tight and they have a majority, that he doesn't get through. So that could be a first flashpoint for Biden. And it's not clear to me that Biden knew, unless he has no vetting at all, he knew it. But it's not clear to me that he knew that he was picking this sort of fight.
I think the foreign policy pick, Secretary of State Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor. Well, only one of those has to go through the Senate, right? But I think in principle, on ideological grounds, Blinken should be okay in the Senate because he is, he and Sullivan, they're both blobsters, card-carrying members of the blob. Certainly not as far left, or at least as dovish as some of us might have hoped. I would have much rather seen William Burns as Secretary of State. So on those grounds, I don't think you'll have a problem. Steve Bannon is claiming that Tony Blinken's going to have a Hunter Biden problem. But then after he said that, the New York Post ran this totally lame piece about a couple of Hunter Blinken emails that amount to absolutely nothing at all, as far as I can tell.
But there is an Epstein connection, Bob.
I saw that.
This is our third Epstein connection of this episode. People have been complaining that we haven't talked enough about Epstein.
Bring it on.
Apparently, Blinken's stepfather was the lawyer for Robert Maxwell, who was Ghislaine Maxwell's father, allegedly an agent of the Mossad, who disappeared overboard from his yacht shortly after talking to Blinken's stepfather. There's no evidence that I know of that Blinken has anything to do with this, but it is an Epstein connection. So I thought I should bring it up for our viewers.
You're doing your duty,
An Epstein connection. I'm compromised on Blinken because I know him. He's very good friends with some friends of mine. I've been to Seder at his house once. Very gracious man. Very nice guy.
Don't say too much. Let's save some for the parrot room here.
Anyway, I'm compromised. People should just know I'm not going to go after this guy hammer and tongs.
Not outside of the parrot room. You're not.
Probably not inside the parrot room.
We'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
Here's
I would think he would sail through.
Here's a question.
I agree.
Biden knows Blinken and Sullivan very well, has worked with them very closely. Now, oddly, when they unveiled the national security team, they did not unveil a Secretary of Defense. By some accounts, that's because the person considered the favorite, Michelle Flournoy, has run into trouble at the last minute among it. I mean, part of it would be opposition from the left, which God knows she deserves. But apparently part of the issue, reportedly, is that Biden doesn't know her as well as he knows the other two. And here's a question. Biden's cognitive status, a subject we've discussed before. Do you think it is it disposes him and those around him who are choosing the cabinet and the advisory team to strongly favor people that have been with him a long time, they're reliable, he knows them very well? Do you get my drift?
Yes, it also may favor them not giving him information that he maybe needs and oversimplifying it in a sense of, maybe he doesn't have the bandwidth to handle a vast complexity of considerations about Michelle Flournoy.
Wait, you're saying that even
just
now,
speculation.
Okay, but these are two separate issues. What I'm saying is,
I'm I understand. You're making a separate point.
You would want, you would want trusted, anyway.
Walter Shapiro tweeted last night that, why is my inbox overflowing with people telling me how wonderful Michelle Flournoy is? That would indicate that she's in trouble and she's ginned up a sort of gossip email campaign defending her. She also has the problem that, Biden's pissed off the left enough here. Does he really want to piss them off even more with his Defense Department choice? And third, she was in this consulting firm with Tony Blinken.
West exec.
That would mean the two most important foreign policy positions both came from the same consulting firm, which is not something that it's a swampy thing. You go out, you leave government, you start a consulting firm, you do some business with the Chinese, I believe, or that has to do with easing people's easing Americans' entry into China, at least.
Wait, you mean West Exec, their consulting firm did that? Well, maybe, but more broadly,
it's not something Biden wants to call attention to, that my entire administration comes from this one possibly swampy consulting firm.
Well, also, West Exec, they refused to disclose their clients. Now, it was co-founded by Michelle Flournoy and Tony Blinken. So, and they refused to disclose their clients. They acknowledge that some of them are in the defense business. Well, I would like to see all of them. If I'm going to judge the behavior of either Tony Blinken or Michelle Flournoy as it affects various defense contractors and so on, I would love to be able to see what this client list was. So far, West Exec has refused to disclose it. I would think some senators might ask it during confirmation hearings that it be disclosed.
It's possible that the China thing was just accusations on the right and not proven. Then I'm sorry. If they haven't revealed their client list, who knows what they did? But so that could be a third reason why he's postponing her. So, and the fourth reason would be to piss you off.
She's. I mean, she is the military-industrial complex embodied in a single human being.
This thing's about to go off here.
Okay, so I've got to. I want to say there's something I wanted to say about Blogging Heads. First of all,
we'll continue this in the Parrot Room.
Yeah, right. But the part I've got to say out here, just because it addresses some complaints from Blogging Heads commenters, and let's see if I can quickly find a couple of them.
We should induce people to follow us into the Parrot Room because we have a whole list of topics.
Oh, explosive. They are explosive topics.
So we're going to keep talking about it in the Parrot Room. We just ran out of time here.
It's so explosive. That's what kills me, is the explosiveness. Anyway, yes. The Parrot Room is relevant to all this because what I want to say is we got some complaints from Blogging Heads commenters about the fact that the Glenn Show, which is on the Blogging Heads TV network, Glenn Lowry's show, first of all, Glenn has established a Patreon, and we collaborated with Glenn on that. As part of that, we ran. So Glenn is, he's producing, first of all, some content that's only available to patrons. You're familiar with that concept. That's what our Parrot Room is for people who want to go to patreon.com/Parrot Room and contribute to our cause. But anyway, so Glenn, he has exclusive content that's for patrons only. And in addition to that, he and John are having, John McWhorter, his well-known partner in crime, are having 2 conversations a month. And we took a long excerpt from one and put it out in public and said, if you want to see the whole thing now, you got to be a patron. We will put the whole thing online for everyone in a couple of days, in 2 or 3 days or whatever. And that's going to be something that Glenn does. So this led to complaints on Blogging Heads from people like, wait, you're putting things on the Blogging Heads site that aren't even the whole conversation. Let me say that I think probably that was in a way a glitch. In the future, we will put those kind of sneak preview things on the YouTube channel, but maybe not on the Blogging Heads site. So that's the response to that. I want to back up and say something about the status of Blogging Heads. So you and I and Greg Dingle started Blogging Heads 15 years ago. Then And I want to talk about that more in the Parrot Room. I want to reminisce. For a while, we tried to. I started an LLC, tried to make it a going venture, didn't work. And then for the last 10 years, it's been on essentially a philanthropic foundation. I started the Nonzero Foundation for that. The philanthropic model no longer works in terms of grants from kind of foundations. I mean, we have gotten a couple of non-huge ones this year, but that's clearly going to peter out because what we do is no longer unusual, right? I mean, it's not like we're the only way to get, to get at a certain kind of subject matter that a foundation wants to see attention given to, or anything like that. So we are having to, I hope that we can continue doing what we do, both our conversations, the other conversations I do on the Wright Show, and then the other conversations on the Bloggingheads platform, like DMZ, the Glenn Show, and so on. And, technically on Meaning of Life TV of the philosophy show, Sophia, but, that's also part of the Bloggingheads family, broadly speaking. But we do have to move to a crowdfunding model. And that's why you and I keep making these appeals for patreon.com/parrot room. I certainly encourage people to support Glenn's Patreon and, some of which does go to help the foundation and the Bloggingheads stuff broadly. And then there's also, if you Google Patreon and Nonzero Foundation, you can contribute to its enterprises broadly, including, all the audio video stuff, the Nonzero newsletter, and so on. So that is the backdrop for what Glenn is doing. It's been very successful. Glenn has a deservedly large following.
Yeah.
Now somebody in the Bloggingheads comment comment section raised the question of well, shouldn't you have a way to just get all of the bonus content for any Bloggingheads thing by paying a certain amount of money at the Nonzero Foundation level? We haven't figured out a way to do that, but it's an interesting idea. I just want to let people know we hear that question. We'll think about it. There are complications associated with it.
My general philosophy on all these things is keep it simple, stupid.
Which would be what, a separate Patreon for each show?
No, just keep it the way it is. You want Glenn, you subscribe to Glenn. You want us, you subscribe to us.
Right.
2 options. That's it.
Yeah.
No special package deals. Blah 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 blah. But there is a reason why there are special package deals. So
if it were easy to do, but there are complications we needn't get into here.
If I had my way, Amazon never would have come up with Prime. You pay for the shipping every time you buy the article.
Really?
What's this bullshit about, you pay once a year and you get all this stuff for free? Too complicated. Anyway.
That's funny. You actually consider that complicated? It simplifies life.
No, it actually is simplifying, yes. But I'm trying to come up with an example of why I'm a bad businessman.
Well, I think you and I have both provided plenty of evidence over the years of being bad business people.
Yeah. Anyway.
So we don't need to do that. We do need to thank people who have stuck with us for, there are people who have been watching, keeping an eye on our content for these 15 years. That's amazing. Thank you.
You're going to name them now?
No. I don't know. You hear from them every once in a while on Twitter or something. They say, I've been watching this since I was, in kindergarten, and now I'm on Medicare, and, that kind of thing.
Oh, I thought you were going to roll the credits where we list all their names, but no.
Well, there are so many people who've helped us over the years. People helping us now are, the aforementioned Aria Cohen-Wade, who's been with us a very long time. Nikita Petrov, Colleen Smith, Mark Sussman, and so on. new person who's helping me on the foreign policy parts of the newsletter, Connor Eccles, and so on. But we could go way back to the original staff. We would only do that in the parrot room. When you start mentioning Brenda and Sang and Brian and, geez, could go on forever.
Okay, well, we've overshot our limit.
I know.
But not by that much.
Not by as much as
an
in
hour
the past.
10.
So we're kind of proud of our performance this week. So now on to the parrot room, and smash that like button, rate us, review us. Is there anything I've missed?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. So I will see you in the parrot room.
See you, Bob.
That'll get him there.